If you've been around trains and rail fans for long enough, you most certainly will have heard of heritage units. These are locomotives or a series of locomotives painted in fallen flag railroad schemes, predecessor railroads to modern lines which do not exist today. While I was looking on heritageunits.com, which tracks special interest locomotives as well as heritage units, I got an idea, why not tier list every single heritage unit? And look, I know this has been done before, and by YouTubers with a lot more of a following than me, but I felt like, why not go in and do it all on my own? But little did I know how many engines I would have to go through, so this video is going to have to be split up into two parts. You're currently watching part 1. So, first off, I'm going to need to define what a heritage unit is. And it is simply a locomotive with at least the logo of a predecessor railroad, preferably the full scheme. However, there are going to be some exceptions, such as the CSX sticker units. Those are not going to be on here, and neither will business units such as CSX's F40PHs or CPKC's F units. But the BNSF 25th anniversary engines will, so it's a little bit of a flexible definition. And also, of course, we need to define how the tier list is going to work. Unlike my Amtrak video where S and F tier were reserved for one scheme each, those two tiers will be open for multiple schemes today, so of course you're going to be seeing those S and F tiers a little bit more. And in addition, I'm opening up a new tier between the D and F tiers, the E tier, which of course ranks between D and F. So, without further ado, let's begin this enormous undertaking with Amtrak's heritage units. And starting off, we have Amtrak number 46, kind of debatable if this is a heritage unit or not, but considering it is a 50th anniversary locomotive, I will consider it a heritage unit for the Phase 5 paint scheme. The Phase 5 scheme, it looks decent, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there's so many Phase 5 locomotives out there that having a heritage unit for the scheme specifically just feels a little bit weird. I'm not going to rank it low, but I'm not going to rank it high either, so I feel that we should start off with putting this one into the C tier. And following up with that, we have Amtrak number 108, the Phase 6 heritage unit. This one, I feel, does Phase 6 much better than the ALC 42's version. The weird silver stripe on the very back of the locomotive is omitted, and it looks nice. Not as nice as Phase 7, but it still looks like a pretty good scheme. I'm willing to put this one up into the B tier. Going way back in time to the next heritage unit, we have Amtrak 130, the Phase 2 heritage unit, which actually replaced number 66, which was the original Phase 2 heritage unit. This scheme, in my opinion, looks way better on the F40PH and SDP40F, but it looks alright on the Genesis. I'm gonna put it in the same tier as 108, B tier. And following that up, we have Phase 3, which has more heritage units on Amtrak than any other scheme. The one you're seeing here is the F40 variant, specifically on engine number 145. I've always loved Phase 3, and I know that I kind of messed around with the placement of this scheme in the previous video, but I'm gonna be honest, this scheme, I don't feel it should go into A tier, because it just doesn't look quite right on a P42, so I'm sorry, y'all. This is going to be a B tier scheme as well. The next heritage unit is also in Phase 3, number 160, the P32-8 variant of Phase 3, also known as the Pepsi can. And frankly, this scheme would look great on everything. So, because the S tier is open in this video, we have our very first S tier scheme. Absolutely incredible. I would love to see this. And as it currently stands, it's my favorite Amtrak heritage unit. Well-deserved ranking here. And speaking of looking good on everything, next up is Amtrak 161, Phase 1. This actually is another heritage unit that replaced an older one, with this one replacing 156. Although the 50th anniversary logo kind of spoils the mood a little bit compared to the 40th anniversary predecessor, it still looks really good. I have no problems with giving this one an A tier rating. And speaking of an engine that replaced another engine with the same scheme, Amtrak 164 is the Phase 4 heritage unit replacing 184. I'm not going to change my opinion on Phase 4 from the previous video that I did this. It looks kinda mid, but at the same time, whatever, I'll give it a B tier, just for the sheer novelty of having 2 Phase 4 Heritage units. And next is so far the only ALC 42 Heritage unit, number 301, which is in the Day 1 or Phase 0 scheme, and frankly, Amtrak really did this scheme justice. They didn't just go in and recreate the scheme, they improved it, and it looks freaking slick on a Charger. I'm willing to put this one up in the A tier. And to end off Amtrak, we have some repeat schemes, specifically Phase 3. Engines 700 to 717 that work on the Empire service, and NPCU number 90406, pictured here as 406, all have the Phase 3 scheme that was put on the F40s. I'm not going to change my rating from 145, so it's a B tier scheme. I don't want to do this anymore. Look, I get what BNSF was trying to go for here, but at the same time, it doesn't really work. It looks pretty eye-catching indeed, but at the same time, it kind of screws up BNSF's design ethos, with the BNSF logo not being in the center and all sorts of different logos. It's hard to even call this a heritage unit. I'm sorry, but this one's going straight down to the Shadow Realm of F tier. Well, after that, we've got some legitimately great schemes here. We're now in Canadian National, and starting off, we have engine 3008, Illinois Central. I just love the Death Star scheme to bits. I mean, it's so awesome to see this on a Gevo. I had always thought about how cool it would be to see an IC scheme on a modern CN locomotive, and now we have it. This is an S tier scheme for sure. And following up with that is number 3023, the Elgin, Joliet, and Eastern, or specifically the J-Ball logo. It looks kind of weird with how much orange is on this locomotive, and orange and green, they don't really compare and contrast that well on a locomotive, but it looks nice on a Gevo. All of CN's heritage units look really good, but this one, I feel, is the weakest of the bunch. I can't rank it any higher than B tier. Sorry, guys. Next up is 3069, the Wisconsin Central. This one, I'm gonna have to revise what I said about 3023 being the weakest link. This one, something just doesn't feel right. It's most likely how much yellow there is on the locomotive, but at the same time, the maroon feels almost purplish. It's kind of off-putting. I'm gonna put this one in the B tier as well, but this one really kind of slipped up a bit. However, 3115 is obviously the best of the bunch. I mean, come on. BC Rail is a legendary fallen flag, and almost all of its schemes, from the Pacific Great Eastern two-tone green to the navy blue and white of its dying days, looks absolutely awesome, and it's great to see the hugely underrated hockey stick scheme get put on a modern Gevo. I'm going to put this one below the 3008 into A tier, but it is a very, very, very highly rated A tier ranking. And by my definition of what I should include, I'm going to include CN 3309 in this ranking. All that's different about this locomotive is that the normal CN Noodle logo is replaced with the old Wafer logo. It looks nice, but at the same time, it's not what I'm used to, so I'm sorry, this one's going to have to go down into the C tier. 3331 is really similar in that it has a vintage logo on the side. However, I'm not really sure what this logo is called, but I know that it was a very, very old CN logo from its early days, and it still holds up today. It's still going to be down in the C tier, but it's above the 3309. I don't know what CN was thinking when it applied heritage schemes to yard switchers, but 7600 and 600 look absolutely awesome in this old CN scheme, the green and yellow. It's always kind of looked weird in old photos because of the photo's age, but seeing this on a modern locomotive with our new camera technology, it's just a treat. This one's an A tier. And similarly, 7601 and 601 have a heritage scheme, but it's the Illinois Central Death Star. Again, I'm not gonna say much. I'm just gonna put this up in the S tier. It looks so awesome with modern CN equipment. And to end off Canadian National, we have number 8952, the Grand Trunk Heritage Unit. And honestly, it's a really nice homage to GT's favor for EMD locomotives by having this heritage unit as an SD70M-2. But really, the GT scheme was so simple, it looked decent on everything. I'm gonna give it a B tier. Moving on into CPKC, there's only really heritage units on the CP side. Specifically, starting off with CP3084, it's in the classic CP gray and maroon livery. It's another one of those schemes that's a bit complicated for the modern era, but it looks really good on this engine. I'm not going to rank it low at all. It's definitely an A-tier scheme. CPKC also has quite a few SD70 ACUs in the classic CP scheme, and it looks a lot different on the ACU considering that the CP logo is on the front. That's different enough that I'm going to rank it differently. And specifically, the first few locomotives in this series have the script scheme, which is just bigger font and more stylized. I really like this one. It's going to get an A2 scheme as well. And moving on to the very similar block scheme, the only difference is the style of the letters and the position and size of the gray stripe along the side of the locomotive. I don't like this one quite as much as the script scheme, but it still looks decent. But it is enough to get a downgrade into the B tier. When CP absorbed the Central Maine and Quebec Railroad, they also took on their heritage unit. Number 9017 memorializes the Bangor and Aroostook Railway, which is honestly an extremely underrated scheme. I really love this scheme, especially on an SD40-2F. This one is very much worthy of the A tier. As for CSX, I'm going to do a lightning round for these locomotives. They're all pretty similar in their format with the YN3C front and the heritage scheme on the back, so I'm just going to go through the number, the railroad it's memorializing, and the tier I'm going to rate it. So, here we go. 1827, B&O, B tier scheme. I really like this one. 1834, Georgia Railroad, D tier, doesn't look good. 1836, RF&P, B tier. 1850, Louisville and Nashville, C tier scheme, it's kind of basic. 1852, Western Maryland, D tier, it looks like the flag of Texas. 1853, New York Central, A tier, font's wrong but it looks really nice. 1869, Chesapeake, Ohio, S tier, I love this one. 1871, Atlantic Coastline, A tier, you don't get much purple on engines. 1875, P&LE, E tier, it's just way too basic. 1877, CNEI, A tier, underrated fallen flag. 1899, Pierre Marquette, another S tier, it looks awesome. 1900, Seaboard Airline, B tier, scheme looks kinda weird. 1967, Seaboard Coastline, C tier, basic scheme. 1972, D tier, you've already memorialized these railroads. 1973, Chassis System, B tier, the blues kinda clash a little bit. 1976, Conrail Quality, D tier, blues are really clashing one another. 1982, Seaboard System, C tier, really basic scheme. Yeah, that was really fast, but at the same time, a lot of these schemes have a lot of things in common, and I just wanted to get it out of the way a little bit quickly so I can talk about some railroads with less heritage units. So anyways, let's continue on. The Iowa Interstate Railroad has a single heritage unit, number 513, memorializing the Rock Island Railroad, specifically the red and black scheme with white accents, which is criminally underrated. This scheme looks phenomenal on a Gevo, it looked awesome on the Alcos it was applied to. This one is a definite S tier scheme, and no one will change my mind on that fact. MBTA 1129 has also been confirmed to be a heritage unit, although for what, I have no idea. I don't think that this scheme has been used on MBTA before, but it looks kind of similar to some older schemes. But at the same time, what is it memorializing? It looks nice, but I can't rank it any higher than the E tier. I just don't know what it's trying to do. Sorry, guys. And on to another commuter agency that has many more heritage units, we have Metra number 90, painted in the scheme of the Chicago and Northwestern 400s. This scheme is another one of those that just looks wicked no matter what is put on, and the fact that the yellow and dark green is on a streamlined F59 PHI, it's just awesome. This is an A tier scheme for sure. Another scheme that is just bad awesome that Metra has is number 211, an F40 PHM-2 in the scheme of the Burlington route. and at the same time, the red striping on the side is still the Metra striping. Like, this is how you make a heritage unit. This is, and for a long time, likely will be my favorite heritage unit ever created. This one goes to the very, very, very top of the S tier.
The Milwaukee Road.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. But yeah, 405's scheme is the colors of
The Milwaukee Road.
There I go with the memes again. But it does look awesome on the Metra template. It's an S tier scheme. But you know what doesn't look good with the Metra template? Rock Island's colors. And unfortunately, 425 does not look like a good heritage unit at all. I'd say that it could be a good, like, State of Illinois replacement, but at the same time, it doesn't feel as much of a heritage unit, so unfortunately it's gonna have to break the cycle of great heritage units on Metra and get a D tier. And finally, we have Metra 500 and 502, which are supposed to commemorate the RTA, the predecessor to Metra, but at the same time, they don't do much to stick out from the rest of the SD70s on Metra's roster. They all have the same red and white chevrons on front and the baby blue back. But, I mean, I guess the striping is a little bit different. I don't know. I hate to say this, but it's gonna have to go into the D tier as well. And that wraps up part 1 of this video. Be sure to stick around for part 2, and if you liked this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and maybe drop a suggestion for another tier list I could do down in the comments below. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in part 2.